Imagine a hotel room in New York City, right? And it's being physically cleaned by a maid.
Okay, pretty standard.
Yeah, but here's the catch. The maid is currently sitting at a desk in Manila.
Wow.
I know it sounds completely like science fiction. This is actually the imminent future of the global
It
economy.
really is.
And, predicting the future is, well, it's inherently dangerous. There's that famous quote from the ancient Confucian poet Lao Tzu that says, those who have knowledge don't predict. Those who predict don't have knowledge.
Right.
It just kind of makes you want to throw your hands up and not even try to guess what's coming next?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely much safer to just sit back and, watch it happen. But there is a really powerful counter-argument to that mindset from the mathematician Henri Poincaré.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he argued that it is far better to foresee without certainty than not to foresee at all. Because if we don't try to look ahead, I mean, especially with the sheer speed of technological change today, right?
Right, it's so fast.
Exactly. We simply cannot prepare society for the massive disruptions headed our way if we just put our heads in the sand.
And that is exactly our mission for you today. We are taking a deep dive into the future of globalization. Specifically, we're exploring this radical transformation on the horizon that the sources call the third unbundling.
It's a huge concept.
It really is. I mean, we hear endless headlines that artificial intelligence is coming for our jobs, right? But today, we're going to look at the data and explore why something called remote intelligence, or RI, might actually be the force that rewrites the global economy first.
It's a profound shift. It really is. But to really grasp the mechanics of this radical transformation, we first need to look at the bedrock of how globalization actually works today.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So historically, you could think of globalization as being held back by three cascading constraints. That's the cost of moving goods, the cost of moving ideas, and the cost of moving people.
Got it. So 3 physical barriers to a fully connected world.
Percep-
If we look at that first one, like the cost of moving goods, it's so easy to look at today's geopolitical climate and assume we're heading for this massive, 1930s style surge in protectionism. Giant walls going up at every border, stopping the flow of physical goods.
Right. Everyone thinks that.
Yeah. But looking at our sources, the actual mechanics of modern trade make that highly unlikely, right?
Exactly. And we have empirical proof of why. I mean, think back to the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis.
Oh, man, yeah.
It caused the sharpest, deepest, and just most synchronized drop in world trade in recorded history. Joblessness shot up instantly.
It was terrifying.
It was. And politicians were under immense pressure from their constituents to do something, right, to protect their domestic industries. Now, in the past, that exact scenario led to massive retaliatory tariffs.
Like the 1930s.
Right. But in 2009, that 1930s-style protectionism just never materialized.
Because the underlying math of manufacturing had fundamentally changed. Like, you literally can't put a tariff on an import today without realizing you're taxing your own exports.
Precisely. Today, we rely on these heavily fractionalized international production networks. So a single smartphone might have components from, 30 different countries.
Right.
If a politician suddenly walls off their borders today with massive tariffs, they aren't protecting a domestic factory. They are completely severing that factory's supply chain.
Right. They'd be cutting off the very intermediate parts their own workers need to build the final product.
Exactly. Walling up borders in the 21st century destroys jobs locally just as surely as it does globally. It's basically an act of economic self-sabotage that even the most populist politicians quickly realize they can't afford.
But wait, I'm getting stuck on the shipping aspect, though. If we're talking about the cost of moving physical goods, doesn't the price of oil dictate how cheap it is to move cargo around the world?
Didn't think so.
Because if oil prices absolutely skyrocketed in the 2000s, which they totally did, shouldn't that have slammed the brakes on global supply chains? Like, it became incredibly expensive to put things on boats.
You would naturally assume so. But the data reveals the exact opposite. Figure 62 from our source material tracks oil prices against the rise of the second unbundling, which is the era of global supply chains.
Okay.
So in the 1990s, oil prices halved. They dropped from $40 a barrel to $20. That provided a great tailwind.
Makes sense.
But then, after the year 2000, oil prices shot up fivefold, over $100 a barrel. But despite that massive headwind, global supply chain trade just powered ahead relentlessly.
Was that because the margins of wage arbitrage were just that enormous?
Exactly. The labor savings gained by offshoring stages of production to developing nations vastly outweigh the increased shipping costs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, moving a factory from the U.S. to Mexico or China saves so much on the cost of human labor that even a five-fold increase in the fuel needed to ship the parts back, it just couldn't erase the profit margin.
So it didn't even matter.
Right. Oil prices affect the margin, sure, but they are no longer the ultimate bottleneck for global trade.
Okay, so if physical borders and shipping costs can't stop globalization anymore, the only thing that could slow it down is the sheer complexity of coordinating it all.
Yes.
But that brings us to the collapse of the second constraint, right? The cost of moving ideas. And this is entirely driven by the information and communication technology revolution, the ICT boom.
And unlike those unpredictable spikes in oil prices, the trajectory of communication costs is driven by cold, hard mathematics.
The compounding laws.
Exactly. We are riding the compounding S-curves of Moore's law, Gilder's law, and Metcalfe's law.
Let's actually break those down because they are compounding on top of each other. It's not just computing power doubling every 2 years with Moore's law.
Right.
It's the bandwidth to transmit that data expanding exponentially with Gilder's law, and then the fundamental value of the network exploding with Metcalfe's law.
Which states a network's value equals the square of its users.
Exactly. When you stack those three together, the cost of transmitting a massive, complex engineering blueprint across the globe, it drops to effectively zero.
It creates an unprecedented pipeline for cross-border knowledge flows. Complex ideas, engineering know-how, management strategies, they can all be transmitted instantly and practically for free.
Our sources use this incredible soccer analogy to explain how this shift actually functions in the real world.
I love this analogy.
It's so good. So, the old version of globalization was essentially like two different soccer teams trading players, but this new ICT-driven globalization is like the coach of the winning team spending all their spare time actively training the worst team's players.
Right, yeah.
G7 nations are essentially handing over their hard-earned industrial know-how to developing nations inside these global value chains.
Yes, the intellectual capital is flowing massively from the global north to the global south. It is an unprecedented transfer of technical know-how.
Okay, let's unpack this. If wealthy nations are actively losing their exclusive competitive edge by essentially training developing nations to do the work, why wouldn't a populist government just step in and turn off the tap?
What do you mean?
Well, if you're a politician in a G7 country and your constituents are furious about factories moving abroad, why not just pass a law that makes it illegal to share that intellectual property or engineering know-how across borders? Just ban the IP transfer.
What's fascinating here is how technically impossible that is to execute in practice.
Yeah.
Let's look closely at the example of Bombardier, the aerospace company, setting up a manufacturing plant in Mexico.
Okay.
The knowledge transfer wasn't a single event. It wasn't just a corporate executive handing over a USB drive with a blueprint.
Right, it's like a living ecosystem.
Exactly. It was
Ugh.
hundreds of thousands of emails. It was shared real-time CAD databases where, a Mexican technician flags a structural issue and a Canadian engineer immediately redesigns it and pushes the update live.
It's constant.
It's daily, hour-by-hour video collaboration. To stop that flow of ideas, a government wouldn't just have to block a shipping container at a port. They would have to implement a digital firewall so extreme, so invasive, that it would effectively cut their own country off from the modern internet.
So you'd essentially have to build a digital iron curtain to stop offshoring.
Yeah.
Which means trying to save local manufacturing jobs would end up destroying your entire tech sector, your financial sector, everything. It's a lose-lose.
Precisely. The instinct and absolute economic necessity for maintaining an open, functioning digital society is simply stronger than any protectionist urge. You literally cannot surgically remove the communication required for offshoring without breaking the entire digital economy.
Wow. But within that massive ICT revolution, the sources point out a really crucial battle happening between the C and the I.
Oh, yes.
Communication technology versus information technology. And the mechanism of how they work actually pulls the future of globalization in opposite directions.
It is a brilliant distinction that often gets overlooked. Communication technology, or CT, so think email, Zoom, shared databases, that makes it incredibly cheap and easy to coordinate complex tasks at a vast distance. This fundamentally pushes companies toward more supply chain fractionalization. You chop up the assembly line and scatter the parts across the globe wherever labor is cheapest, because coordinating it all costs you nothing.
Yeah.
So CT is profoundly pro-offshoring.
Because the cost of talking to the factory is basically zero.
Exactly.
But information technology, IT, does the exact opposite. We're talking about computer-integrated manufacturing, advanced robotics, and specifically 3D printing. IT is anti-fractionalization.
Because advanced IT bundles the tasks back together.
Mm.
If you have an industrial-grade 3D printer, you don't need to manufacture the screen in Taiwan, build the battery in China, and assemble it all in Mexico.
You just print it.
You just print the entire object, or at least the vast majority of it, in one single machine, right next to your customer in New York.
Right.
We are inching closer to Star Trek replicators, really.
That's wild.
And when that happens, the transmission of data completely substitutes for the transportation of physical goods.
So if the computer can physically make it for me locally, the global supply chain just collapses inward, which is the perfect pivot, actually. Because if advanced IT and 3D printing eventually stop us from needing to ship physical parts around the world, what happens to the people who build them?
Right, the labor question.
Yeah, what happens to the global labor market? Because that brings us to the third, and historically the most stubborn barrier of all. The cost of moving people and that biological necessity of face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, for all our technological marvels, human beings still fundamentally rely on physical presence to build trust.
Right.
We rely on it to coordinate highly complex, non-routine tasks that require nuance. But that final constraint is about to shatter thanks to the virtual presence revolution.
And we need to be clear here, we are not just talking about firing up a standard Skype or Zoom call where someone is frozen on a tiny laptop screen dealing with lag.
No, not at all.
We're talking about high-end, immersive telepresence. The sources point to Cisco's telepresence systems as the vanguard here. Imagine walking into a boardroom outfitted with massive, life-size plasma screens, custom-calibrated lighting, ultra-high-definition cameras, and true spatial audio.
The spatial audio is huge.
Right. If the executive in Mumbai is sitting on the left side of their screen, their voice physically sounds like it's emanating from the left side of your physical room.
The spatial audio is highly immersive, but the real breakthrough is purely psychological. Human trust is heavily built on micro-expressions.
What are those exactly?
They're these involuntary, incredibly fast facial changes that last roughly a 25th of a second. They tell our subconscious brain whether a person is, concealing an emotion or if they are genuinely, authentically on board with a difficult idea.
And standard video just compresses the image too much to catch that.
Yes. Standard video drops the frames. You literally miss the micro-expressions, which is actually why Zoom fatigue is real. Your brain is working overtime trying to read signals that just aren't there.
That makes so much sense.
Right. But ultra-high-definition telepresence with zero latency catches those micro-expressions perfectly. It fundamentally tricks the ancient parts of the human brain into feeling true physical presence.
And this revolution doesn't stop in executive boardrooms either. It goes straight to the factory floor with telerobotics. It's overcoming the people-to-machine barrier. We already have highly trained surgeons sitting at consoles in one city, operating on humans in another.
Right, and if you can reliably and safely perform open-heart surgery at a distance, you can certainly fix a broken conveyor belt.
Definitely.
Very soon, you'll have highly specialized technicians sitting in a control room in Stuttgart, Germany, wearing haptic gloves, piloting a robot to repair a complex manufacturing line in Brazil.
And when you combine this physical capability with real-time computerized translation, like the rapid AI-driven advancements we're seeing in Google Translate or Apple's iTranslate, the language barrier just vanishes entirely.
Completely vanishes. It's a barrier that divided humanity's labor force for millennia.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. Think about your own daily life. Imagine your job. What happens to your morning commute? What happens to your company's massive real estate footprint in expensive cities? Or their entire corporate travel budget?
It all changes.
Yeah, imagine when holographic telepresence projects full three-dimensional real-time avatars into a physical room. You get the full body language, the eye contact, and instant audio translation in your native language. The geographical walls just melt away.
And when those geographical walls melt, the economic definition of offshoring fundamentally shatters.
How so?
Well, for decades, offshoring was strictly defined by moving the factory to the cheap labor. But with these new technologies, we enter what the author defines as the third unbundling.
The third unbundling. This is the moment we detach the laborer from the labor itself.
Yes. To understand the gravity of this, you have to look at offshoring for what it really is at its core, which is wage arbitrage. Historically, if a U.S. firm wanted to take advantage of low-cost Mexican labor, they had two choices. They could either bring the Mexican workers to the U.S., which is incredibly difficult due to immigration laws, quotas, border friction, all of that.
Or,
Or they could spend millions to build a factory in Mexico, and they overwhelmingly chose the latter.
because moving the factory was literally the only physical way to extract the labor services out of the low-wage country.
Exactly. But now the combination of telerobotics and telepresence allows for a phenomenon we can call virtual immigration. It is telecommuting, but specifically applied to manual physical workers.
The mechanisms described in the text for this are just mind-bending. Let's go back to that opening scenario we talked about. Imagine a maid sitting in an apartment in Manila. They're wearing a VR headset and haptic feedback gloves, and they are piloting a robot that is physically cleaning a hotel room in Oslo, Norway.
It's wild to picture.
Or a security guard in Peru sitting at a command desk, simultaneously piloting a dozen robotic guards patrolling a massive shopping mall in the United States.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the economic implications are just staggering.
Yeah, I bet.
For a long time, the service sector felt entirely immune to globalization. You could not put a haircut in a shipping container, right?
Yeah, right.
You couldn't offshore the physical cleaning of a hotel room or the pouring of a coffee. These were structurally non-traded services. But virtual immigration makes traditionally non-traded physical services highly tradable.
Which is huge.
It is. And in advanced economies, roughly 2/3 of all jobs are in the service sector. Exposing that massive, previously protected portion of the workforce to global wage arbitrage is going to be a historic, systemic shock.
It's like micro-outsourcing on physical steroids. We already have things like Amazon's Mechanical Turk for digital tasks where someone in another country tags photos or transcribes audio for pennies. But now we're talking about Mechanical Turk interacting with the physical, three-dimensional world. So what does this all mean? We constantly hear that artificial intelligence is going to take all these jobs. Will we even need the worker in Manila, or will a billion-dollar AI just clean the hotel room automatically?
Well, that is the great debate of our era. But the concept of remote intelligence, or RI, could be just as transformative, if not more so, than pure AI, simply because of the economics.
Really? How?
Think about building a specialized AI and robotics system that can autonomously navigate the unpredictable chaos of an untidy hotel room.
Okay, yeah, that sounds tough.
It has to seamlessly deal with unexpected physical obstacles and show genuine emotional intelligence if a guest suddenly walks in. That is incredibly expensive and computationally heavy.
Right, because the physical world is just completely unstructured. And AI struggles to know how to fold a towel that's crumpled weirdly on a chair.
Exactly. So why wait decades for a clunky billion-dollar AI to master that highly unstructured physical environment when a remote human operator is highly responsive, emotionally intelligent, and radically cheap today?
Oh, wow. The human brain is already the ultimate general-purpose AI. We just needed a cheap, high-speed internet pipeline to transmit its physical output across the globe.
Yes, exactly.
And once you completely separate who does the physical work from where the work is physically happening, it completely scrambles the economic map.
Where does all the physical production and global wealth actually pool next?
To predict the geography of tomorrow, economists rely on something called the flying geese model.
Okay, how does that work?
The mechanism works like this. When a country starts industrializing, its wages are incredibly low, so they attract and take on the least skill-intensive work, like textile assembly.
Right?
But as their economy grows and rural workers move to cities, the available labor pool shrinks, and their wages naturally rise.
So it gets more expensive to manufacture there. Exactly. The low-margin industries can no longer survive there, so they fly to the next low-wage country in the formation. This happened in Japan, then it moved to South Korea, and now we've seen it happen in China and Mexico. As Chinese wages continue to rise, the most routine, low-skill stages of manufacturing are already flying to places like Vietnam and Bangladesh.
They're the next geese in the formation. But where does the flock go after that? Because eventually, wages rise there too.
Based on geography, proximity, and changing demographics, the author makes a highly specific prediction. The geographic spread of this second unbundling is destined to move next to the east coast of Africa.
The east coast of Africa, really?
Yes, because it sits at an absolutely perfect geographical crossroads. It's relatively close to European markets, and it is positioned perfectly across the Indian Ocean from both India and East Asia.
Ah, I see.
And as telepresence and communication tech make coordinating these sprawling supply chains easier. The cartographical distance, say, the immediate physical closeness of China to Vietnam matters less. Companies will seek out the next massive, untapped pool of available labor, and East Africa is perfectly positioned for that next wave.
But wait, if all these developing nations from Vietnam to East Africa are steadily getting richer and their wages are rising, won't that eventually kill the wage gap entirely?
That's a common thought, yeah.
If everyone around the world roughly makes the same amount of money, the whole arbitrage incentive for offshoring just disappears. Why trade at all?
That is a very logical assumption based on classical economics,
Yeah.
which assumes trade only happens because of differences in cheap labor versus capital,
Yeah.
but it misses how mature trade actually evolves.
Okay.
Look at the trade between the US, Canada, and Western Europe today. These are all high-wage, highly developed regions, yet they trade massively with each other in what we call intra-industry trade.
Why is that?
Because of intense specialization and firm-level excellence. A German company might make the absolute best specialized gear for a medical machine, and a U.S. company makes the most advanced optical sensor. They trade because of extreme specialization and excellence, not wage gaps.
And we're already seeing this profound shift happen with China. They aren't just assembling cheap plastic toys anymore. They're producing highly sophisticated intermediate goods like advanced EV batteries that they actually used to have to import from the West.
Exactly. The trade between the global North and South will soon look just like North-North trade today, driven by specialization, not cheap labor.
Okay, so taking all this in the telerobotics, the firm-level excellence replacing wage gaps, the shifting geography to East Africa, what does the future actually look like for your local economy? The portrait painted by these sources is one of extreme, unprecedented job polarization.
It is a stark reality. The routine, low-skill tasks that involve predictable, repetitive motions are going to be ruthlessly automated by IT and robotics. That middle tier of employment is entirely hollowing out.
But manufacturing won't disappear entirely from places like the US or Europe, right? We'll still make things.
No, it will absolutely remain, but the factory floor will look very different. Factory jobs in the G7 nations will essentially be reserved exclusively for highly skilled workers whose entire job is to oversee, maintain, program, and troubleshoot the robots.
So they become managers of machines.
Exactly. For those workers, the technology becomes a powerful complement to their advanced skills, making them incredibly productive and highly paid. But for low and medium skill workers, those jobs are either eliminated entirely by automation or structurally offshored via remote intelligence and virtual immigration.
Man.
This raises an important question. How on earth does society handle that level of intense structural polarization? You have one group of people whose skills are heavily amplified and rewarded by this technology, and another massive, newly vulnerable group whose physical labor is suddenly in direct competition with the entire global population, both digital and physical.
It's going to require a total rethink of everything we assume about work. It is a lot to take in, but we have tracked an incredible journey today.
We really have.
We went from the steam revolution in the 19th century, which radically lowered the cost of moving physical goods. Then we moved into the late 20th century, where the compounding math of the ICT revolution radically lowered the cost of moving ideas and information.
Right.
And now we are standing on the absolute precipice of the virtual presence revolution, which is going to move physical labor services across the globe without actually moving the human laborers.
It is a complete paradigm shift.
Hmm.
The mechanisms driving globalization over the next 20 years will look absolutely nothing like your parents' globalization.
Yeah.
The main driver has shifted entirely from moving parts to moving data and human presence.
And as those physical and digital borders continue to bleed together, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Let's go back to that maid sitting in Manila, piloting a robot to clean a hotel room in New York City. The physical impact of the clean room is happening in America. The human effort, the sweat, and the cognition is happening in the Philippines. So who collects the income tax on that labor?
That's a great question.
Does that worker legally require the New York minimum wage, or do they get the Philippine market rate? If the robot malfunctions and injures someone, whose safety regulations apply?
Oh, wow.
As remote intelligence scales up, you really have to wonder, can the very concept of a national economy even survive the third unbundling?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
It is far better to foresee without certainty than not to foresee at all. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today.